All kinds of rumors and set photos are floating around regarding the villains of Spider-Man Homecoming, but let's take a look at 5 Marvel Spider-Man villains that were made for the movies. What's up, everybody? I'm Stan, and welcome to Detail Comics, where we go over comics in detail. This is going to be a special weekly one-off where I'm going to go over 5 villains, 5 real serious villains from the Spider-Man universe that I feel would make a killing in the movies. They are just made for it. So first, we got to lay down the ground rules. First, they can't be appearing as a Marvel villain in any other property, because that takes away the essence, it takes away the strength of them in a Spider-Man standalone movie. And rule number 2, they could not have been introduced as a villain specifically in previous Marvel, well, let's say Sony-backed Spider-Man films. Because it would have been really easy to go, Carnage, Venom, Kingpin, Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, done. So this is going to make it a little bit tougher, but I hope you guys are going to be happy with the list that I came up with. So the first Spider-Man villain that I think that could make a major impact in the Spider-Man universe is Mysterio. So Mysterio appeared in Amazing Spider-Man 13 and then Mysterio 2, later on in Amazing Spider-Man 141. And what we're really dealing with is a person that is a visual effects master. So he's using his special effects and things like that to commit crimes, rob banks, those kind of things. So he seems like a relatively low-level villain. However, in this day and age, being some sort of special effects wizard, in real life as well as in post, could have some seriously damning impacts to Spider-Man. Say that, some leaked footage gets out onto the internet, or he gets set up into a very realistic kind of scene to really defame him and those kind of things. And on top of that, if you've got somebody that's relatively a master of disguise or could induce hallucinations, possibly making Spider-Man fight his allies, that is a very huge thing. And this could play into a kind of Old Man Logan storyline where Mysterio was clearly the most badass he will ever be. So that's why I think that he'd be a really good fit for a villain in a Spider-Man movie. Next, I've got my second villain on the list, and really it's kind of a pair. So I'm going to split the difference between Hammerhead and Tombstone. So Hammerhead originally appeared in Amazing Spider-Man 113, and then Tombstone appeared in Web of Spider-Man 36. So what you've got is more like an archetype. It's more about what they represent. Spider-Man is a very street-level hero. He's a vigilante that happens to get involved in larger-scale escapades, but most of the time he's taking down bank robbers, people robbing stores, those kind of things. And occasionally it's like a super massive one-up kind of supervillain, but everything's really localized to New York City. And what these guys represent, since they're both mobster characters, is the seedy underbelly of New York and the crime, and it spreads out into the city. So I think they could set up a really cool presentation with how, various mob and enforcer level characters that are being run by enhanced individuals, now that we've introduced enhanced individuals into the overall scheme of the Marvel Universe, could be very interesting. And because he's fighting on a very street level kind of situation, ultimately there could be some very good character dynamic, a lot of good mob fighting, him versus several enforcers. And there's already rumors that the Enforcers, a character group of about 3 to 5 characters, is already in Spider-Man Homecoming, so this could really expand on that kind of theory. Next, I'm going to go a little outside the box, and we're going to talk about ManWolf. So ManWolf made his first appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 124, and the unique thing about him not only is the fact that a moonstone turns him into a fucking werewolf, but the fact that he is J. Jonah Jameson's son. So John Jameson III, the son of J. Jonah Jameson, is an astronaut that ventured out into space, came back, with this kind of moonstone artifact, which embedded itself, a shard of it embedded itself in him, and causes him to transform into a man-beast. So what I'm thinking for this one is that what they could do, since they like to play with different genres, is this could be like a body horror kind of teen slasher movie. So Peter Parker and some of his friends, they're like over at other people's apartments and stuff like that, and then you see this monster transforming in the dark, and it could be a very cool kind of horror, suspense, thriller kind of story. And I really like that aspect. Plus, it gives you the real motivation as to why J. Jonah Jameson hates Spider-Man. Because when John Jameson was coming back into Earth, there was a problem with his re-entry, and Spider-Man saved the day. And J. Jonah Jameson always felt that took away from the success of his son as an astronaut. Like he was showing him up. And that's one of the deep-seated feelings in J. Jonah Jameson when he hates so hard on Spider-Man. So there's so many layers you could play with his character that it would be a great story for a movie. As we're getting further down this list, we're definitely going up in terms of the age of Spider-Man, just because there's a little bit more mature content that you could include in these stories. So next we're going to get to Kraven the Hunter. Basically, he used to be a Russian aristocrat that basically emigrated into the United States. At least that's what his lineage is. And he fancies himself, a very high-level person and a big game hunter. So I would like to see a little bit of a separation for those kind of things. You could kind of keep that sense of affluence about him, but ultimately add in the characteristics of being some sort of forged, hardened military personnel, because currently he's, in the storyline, the original storyline for Kraven the Hunter, he was just, an enhanced kind of individual. He was stronger than a normal man. He was trained. He liked to kill things with his bare hands. And I like the idea of a highly trained professional stalking Spider-Man like he's some sort of prey, like he's big game through the skyscrapers of Manhattan, all along New York. It becomes a very psychological thriller because you're going to see this highly trained Russian who's not necessarily, shooting him with a rifle, but ultimately with a camera lens and doing his research and stalking his prey, finding the right time to strike, and ultimately culminating in a serious hand-to-hand combat battle with a very trained, athletic kind of person, probably on the level of Steve Rogers or the Winter Soldier in that kind of physical combat, but with much more serious intentions. And I think that could be a really cool movie to see. Last on the list is someone that's not necessarily a supervillain, but definitely plays a big part in Spider-Man and Peter Parker's life. And that's going to be Felicia Hardy, aka the Black Cat. I know that Felicia Hardy was introduced in Amazing Spider-Man 2, but they didn't do anything with her character, and they didn't make her Black Cat, so that does not count. So I might be twisting my rules for my own benefit, but I think that there's a real serious kind of story that you could tell in this respect. He senses that there's good in her. She is out there, she's been taught by her father, who is a cat burglar, that to only accept the best in life. She is out there trying to provide those things, and nothing is never enough. There's a lot of different character aspects that could really be developed in a Felicia Hardy character that could make her probably a more pronounced villain or a much more ambiguous character in the overall scope of the Spider-Man universe. I mean, she could be a romantic love interest, despite the fact that she's a few years older than Peter, but, she could also be a very serious kind of adversary. She's a gymnast, she's got some enhanced abilities according to various lines and various parts of the story, but ultimately you could shape that character to make her very interesting while interjecting a kind of a roadblock in various other aspects of Peter's life. Every time that she comes into his world, he kind of gets thrown for a loop. And that's one of the most interesting things about her. So while she might not necessarily be a villain per se, she definitely causes trouble for Peter Parker and Spider-Man. So that's my list of the top 5 villains that I'd like to see in Spider-Man upcoming movies, but I want to know what you guys think. What do you think of my list? Is it complete bullshit, or is it something that you can totally get behind? Let me know in the comments down below, and give me your top 5 if you got something different. As always, if you like what you see, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe to get more news, reviews, and commentary on comic books, comic book movies, comic book TV shows and games, and anything and everything inside the world of comics.